You're a user of AI, whether you like it or not. It's here to stay, but it's not a danger to you. So I want to emphasize that. Many people are afraid of artificial intelligence. It's not a danger.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I am your host Drishti, and today you folks are in for a treat. We have got an AI expert with us on the show today. So we have the pleasure of welcoming Patrick Bangert to our interview series. I would like to begin with just a quick intro of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 30,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Patrick Bangert is the VP of AI at Samsung SDS America. He represents Samsung's AI activities to the outside world and directs the AI engineering and AI science teams. His aim is to provide the world with full spectrum of AI model development backed by state-of-the-art technology and human expertise. With a background process industry, Patrick has an eye on practical applications that deliver value in the real world and have contributed to many practical AI projects in 4 continents. So hi, Patrick. We are really happy to have you on Engati CX.
Hi, Drishti. I'm very happy to be here.
So I would like to begin with the first question that we have, the very popular question that how do you think small business can adopt automation to stay running during the lockdown?
Very interesting question. Of course, it comes down to what is your small business and how small is it? If you're running a physical shop that sells things, automation is going to be tricky. Because you're running a shop, effectively you need a cashier, you need somebody to stock the shelves. That's going to be very tricky in automation. And while robotics could help, it will be too expensive for that kind of business model. Other small businesses, maybe like hairdressers, massage parlors, cosmetics type issues. You can do a lot of things by scheduling, for example. At least here in the United States, these shops are open, but by appointment only. And so there are AI applications out there that automatically schedule appointments with you. There is natural language processing that can answer some basic questions, either by audio over the phone or by text over a website. So there are those technologies that really help you. If you have a sales-oriented business where you can ship things to your customer, these natural language processing systems can even take your order and then deliver it. Obviously, again, if your small business is a little bit bigger, then there is robotics that can pack things into packages and mail it out for you. So there are various automation technologies. Usually with small businesses, the rub is that you need a certain minimum size of business before this becomes, economically relevant to you, which is, and I'm sorry for this, the scaling factor is there. If your business is truly small, then there is not that much that can be done.
That's true.
But digital technologies like natural language, that's fairly cheap, and the entry barrier is virtually non-existent.
Yeah, I guess the amount of revenue the small business can put into some technology is relatively smaller than the others. So, yeah.
Right. So there's an entry barrier. Yeah. But some of these digital assistants are quite low cost. So they are relevant even for a single shop type application. And we see it here in California all the time. Beforehand, you used to be able to just walk in. Now you have to make an appointment. Now you have your questions answered. You have to answer questions, right? All the COVID questions. have you been in contact with somebody and this and that. That can be automated. The temperature scanning is automated, right? If you walk into a store, they have a laser scanner to measure your temperature. That's automated. So those are pretty low cost.
How do you think AI has evolved in the past few years, and what should companies expect in the future, and can they be ready for highly developed AI systems?
That's the $1 million question. So in the past, briefly, of course, there was some AI development going on for a long time. All right, so neural networks got invented in the 1940s. So if our audience thinks that AI is a new field, it isn't. It's been around for longer than many of us have been alive. And it's been developed mathematically for the most part. It is a branch of mathematics. And nowadays we are in a hype time for it, because really in the past 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more, we've seen three things develop. On the one hand, because of digitization, we have much, much larger data sets. That helps a great deal. Yeah? You cannot train good networks if you don't have data. The second thing is we have now much, much more powerful computers. Again, you cannot train an AI model if you don't have computational resources. Of course, nowadays, my smartphone has more power than 10 years ago my desktop had. So on the basis of that sheer strength, I can do a lot more. The third element that's changed is that we did some more mathematics. So if you dive a little bit into the difficulties of training machine learning models, you'll hear this term vanishing gradient. So that's really the Achilles heel of the older methods. I won't explain that here. It's not a math lecture. But the point is that neural networks with one layer are not very expressive, but they're the kinds of networks that we were able to train. After this mathematical innovation, we can now train networks that have multiple layers, that are much more expressive, that get much higher accuracies. And on the back of that, we can enable many of the technologies that nowadays are considered standard. For example, all the natural language processing that with a single layer you just couldn't do. So those three things put together, lots of data, the power of computers, and thirdly, the innovation of being able to train multiple layers, that's really what brought AI to the current point. Now, from here on going forward, if we look what's going on, so hardware is slowing down. The development of the resources in individual computers is really going down. Nowadays, you need to solve the resource problem by dividing your training task over multiple computers.
Right.
This is called distributed training. Distributed because you're distributed over a cluster of computers. And that's really the way to go forward for the resource-based approach. This is also something that Samsung focuses on a lot. We supply software for distributed training. It is, however, a bit costly, because now you don't need to own one computer with a GPU, you need to own many of them. And so there is, again, an entry barrier into being able to do this. While you can increase the data set, you can't necessarily increase the amount of information in the data set. And so we've, with some problems, there's room to go, but with some other problems, we've basically hit the ceiling for information content. Mathematically speaking, there is a lot of room to grow. So my personal opinion is that it's the mathematics, it's the algorithms where we will see growth and performance potential. And it's primarily in one area. Right now, the models that are very successful are basically neural network-based models. So they're 100% data-driven.
Right.
An algorithm adjusts the weights of some abstract neural network and kind of hopes for the best.
Right.
You can see this with natural language models very well. You give it a sentence, it gives you a sentence back, and that sentence sounds very reasonable at first sight. At second sight, it doesn't sound reasonable at all because of the content of that sentence. So one challenge that any of you can try out, it's fun. If you encounter some chatbot or a model like this, ask it a numerical question. Yeah, ask it something like, I have 3 apples and 4 pears. How many fruits do I have? It'll give you a very funny answer. For the most part, these models do realize that I'm asking for a number in return. But these models cannot do arithmetic, so they'll give you the wrong number back, right? Or if you ask for a time of day, right, it won't be able to add times and answer correctly. So we need to somehow, and I don't know exactly how to do that, but we need to somehow figure out how to add logic to neural networks, how to add some a priori knowledge of the world to the neural networks so that it can argue based on things like numbers. I would at least expect models to be able to like add and subtract numbers correctly. They don't. I would expect it to know things like that the day has 24 hours, so that if I'm at at 10 p.m. and I add 3 hours, I'm in the next morning. Logic like this has to be inserted manually, more or less, and that's not a good thing. So I believe that's where the innovation lies. So basically in marrying up the data-driven approach with the logical approach to have a multi-tiered way forward. So expect to see something like this, hopefully in the next couple of decades. And Terminator is something that you will never see, I believe.
Yeah, that's true. But the examples that you have shared, I guess that would come more from a natural language understanding perspective, that that becomes so strong from the chatbot that whatever I am trying to type, it is not just trained, but it can then slowly understand if what I'm trying to tell. So like the example that you have given, then maybe for the first time if it can say a number, and then if I give a feedback, and then it can understand that maybe that number was not corrected, and maybe with the feedback system at least it can try and give a correct answer. Of course that is a long way. It's very easy when spoken, but the training which would go about behind a bot of that, or a neural network as a whole, that could be, yeah.
Well, you're right, of course. I can train a neural network to be able to add, but why would I want to, right? Addition is such a simple thing. And then even if I made the effort by collecting lots of data and inserting that training sequence, then comes the next thing, subtraction, multiplication. There's lots of world knowledge that's really basic, that really needs to go into these things, and it's not there yet.
Yeah, that's something that should be coming in some years ahead, definitely. So can you share some practical applications of AI that deliver value in the real world?
That's a good question, and it depends on what you mean by value. Right? So each and every one of us interacts with an AI system maybe 10 times a day. Right? Whether you regard that to be valuable is a different story. So, for example, I watch the movies that Netflix tells me to watch. I visit the websites Google tells me to visit. I buy the things that Amazon tells me to buy. I take the car that Uber tells me to get. These are AI systems that solve problems for me. Is it valuable? Yes, to some extent. But of course, it restricts my world, right? I get a slightly easier life because it takes away some complications, some decision making from me, and that's of value. On the other hand, I'm exposed to a very thin amount of content. The
Right.
real danger is this. Once the AI has learned what I like, I only ever get presented with the stuff that's similar to what I liked before. So if there is something else that I would like, but I've never seen it, I will never see it. So my horizons are forever narrowed by that technology. And that's particularly dangerous in politics, of course. If I read certain articles, it doesn't need many for the Facebook or the LinkedIn to learn what sort of articles I read. In the United States, whether I read the more Republican or the more Democrat-oriented content, after a few days of doing this, you will no longer see the other content. It'll be gone. And on the back of that, there is no good conversation, no good education. I never see the other people's point of view. So that's involved. But to your question, so yes, there are many applications, like I mentioned, that offer value. It's a question whether I consider that to be valuable. Of course, in business, then there are many more. So AI, we have to realize, exists to solve extremely specific, targeted problems, right? So just imagine the technology that's being developed now called autonomous driving, right? We're trying to get a car to drive itself without a human being behind the wheel. And that needs a host of technologies that work together in concert. For example, there's a camera at multiple points around the car that takes a video image. It needs to judge things like, is there a person on the road? If yes, then you need to brake, right? Is this thing on the road a person, an obstacle? Is it going to cause an accident if I hit it? So there is a very important difference between whether it's a pylon or a Coke can that's on the road, right? The Coke can is not a problem. I can drive over it. The pylon will kill me. And I need to make that distinction in a small fraction of a second, because either I have to execute an emergency brake maneuver or not. And so there are technologies like this, classification type methods with, is there an obstacle? And the answer is yes or no. Which kind of obstacle is it? The answer could be a multitude of things. How long will it take me before I hit it? That's a forecasting problem. If this person who is on the sidewalk right now continues to walk at the current pace, they will be on the road by the time I get there, right? Now we're in a reasoning situation. Or you can imagine the situation where there are several people on the road. I will hit them unless I execute some crazy maneuver which will put myself at risk. So what do I do? Do I kill myself or do I kill 3 people? There's a calculus involved here that it's an ethical problem now, right? It's no longer what do I do? It's which of 2 very bad situations is slightly less bad, right? So you can see that the one application, autonomous driving, gives rise to a few dozen different AI technologies that need to be deployed. Some of them are technically challenging, some are ethically challenging. And again, I'm not saying that I have the answers to this. I'm just pointing out what are the features. Then, of course, you have your mobile phone that has multiple AI technologies in it. If you have a Samsung phone, there is Bixby, which is the equivalent to Apple's Siri, which is a natural language processing. You can give commands to your phone to do things for you, to call your friends. That's an AI example. In the industry, of course, you have a variety of AI methods. There's a kind of smooth boundary between AI and robotics. So many of the warehouses pack their packages with a robot. They store their goods on shelves that are maybe 20 or 30 stories high, and it's robots that put the packages in and get them out. And it's, of course, AI systems that decide where the packages go, depending on how soon you're going to need them again. So you actually interact with AI many times a day, and you don't even know it. And yes, it does add value to your life, right? So I just want to leave you with the thought of GPS, right? Maybe you're still young enough not to remember how painful it was to drive with a map in your hand. But that was pretty bad because you had to stop all the time. You had to look around for the road signs. You had to find your position on the map. It took you a lot longer. You made a lot of mistakes. And through the advent of GPS, all that went away. It made your life a lot easier, right? You just give the address and it takes you there. So there's value in that. Of course, the payment, if you like, is that you no longer have a sense of direction because you don't practice it, right? So there's always two sides to the coin.
Yeah. So like you just said, right, the sense of direction thing. So my parents give this example that when they were young or they were my age, they used to remember every phone number that they used to dial. And now if I am remembering, I just remember four, like I have four people in my family and I remember only those numbers. The rest I know because I do not have to memorize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a species, humanity has really evolved to a hybrid species. I think now the combination of human plus mobile phone is really a new species on the planet because we've delegated a number of responsibilities to our smartphone that we no longer can do because we've never practiced them, like memory, memorizing memorizing phone numbers. So we would be lost without this, myself included. I have delegated my communication to my phone. It has all the information stored in it. If I lose it, that would be terrible.
Yeah, it's true. It would be a nightmare for us without technology currently. But of course, it would have been a nightmare if it was a COVID without technology. So it has two sides, and of course, the positive side remains a bit heavier than the other one. So yeah. So, what role does AI and technology play in organizations, business, or digital transformation cycle?
It plays a central role. So the digital transformation cycle is really something that starts with digitization, which really is, quote unquote, just getting your physical process measured in real time. So this is something where you might have to install sensors, cameras, microphones, whatever to capture whatever it is that your process is.
Right.
That data would then need to be extracted at regular intervals in time, which, maybe every second, maybe every 10 minutes, depending on what your process is. That gets stored somewhere. And that digitization process for many companies is already so arduous that by the time they hit the end of it, they're like, oh, we're done, right? Digitization finished. Unfortunately, no, because you've just begun. You've kind of entered the transformation process by doing that, even though the digitization aspect is the one that costs most of the money. And that is kind of the Achilles heel here. The first step of installing all this hardware technology, all these sensors, all these cables, all these database systems that gather all this information, that's your capital expenditure. That's what takes all the sweat, because you're going to have to actually install this stuff. Now comes the good part, the fun part. But you don't forget that. Now comes the software component where you analyze that data, where you get to model your processes to come up with some sort of intelligent, sometimes it's called digital twin, that represents your process. And on the back of that, you can make improvements. Now an AI system can learn what is your process doing. It can forecast what will your process be doing. It can examine scenarios. What would your process be doing differently if I were to make this and that change? And now you can actually affect things. You can make changes. You know what the result is going to be. And that can happen not just once, where I say, okay, please exchange this piece of technology for that piece of technology, but it can happen in real time, right? You can just imagine that you basically have a dial on your process that is changeable at any moment of the day, that somehow regulates the output of your process. And then you have basically an advanced process control application, right? We're used to this in a very simple-minded way at home with the thermostat. If you're in India or in California, like we are, we have air conditioning. All right, our European friends have heating. So same idea. On the thermostat, you tell it that I want my home to be at a certain temperature, and now the thermostat basically measures the temperature and judges whether or not to pump up the air conditioning or the heating or to turn it down. And it does that smoothly in such a way that 24 hours a day, your house will be at that temperature that you like, no matter what the outside temperature is like. Right? So a very simple example. This doesn't need AI, but that's the idea. Now, the same thing can be done in a very complicated scenario of, let's say, a manufacturing plant, a power plant, a chemical plant, something like that, or the warehouse where the process is being regulated like this. In a similar way, this could be done in a logistics enterprise where you're driving around thousands of trucks, right? Which truck gets the package? Which driver drives which truck? At what time do they stop at which address? What order do they visit their points of contact? And that's an AI system again, where you could really change the process through that. And that's the digital transformation journey. The first step is this digitization, just getting everything digitized. Then you make these digital twin type technologies that represent the process in a computer. Then you can apply artificial intelligence to proactively change that process to make it better. Now that one step remains, and this is the painful process. It's called change management. This is the point where people have to change. And in my personal experience, that's the point where these projects fail. At that point, you're trying to get people to basically give up on their way of life that they've had for decades and adopt this assisted way. And it's new, first of all, and everything new is bad, right, for most people. It's different than before. I'm going to have to work differently. I will have a different relationship with my boss, with my employees. I will have to adopt interacting more with technology and less with other people. That's less social. I might do more of my work remotely. That's not so desirable. So it's that process of change management that makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
I'll give a practical example, predictive maintenance. So in virtually every industry that has machines, predictive maintenance is a big topic these days, right? From anybody who has a power plant, chemical plant, oil and gas, trucking, anything like that. Predictive maintenance basically asks the question, can you tell me today that in 2 weeks, a certain piece of machinery is going to break down? So the simple answer is yes, we can. These technologies exist. The real question is, what are you going to do about this? If I truly tell you next week, Wednesday at 12 o'clock, your compressor will fail, what are you going to do about it? Are you really going to turn that thing off on the weekend, right? And are you going to order the spare part that you need today and spend money on it so that you have it when the time comes? Are you really going to schedule the maintenance engineer to go there on Monday so that he can, repair it before it breaks down? That's the change of life, because right now the maintenance department waits for the failure to happen and then they rush. Right. That's the life they have led ever since they entered the business. That's what they do. And now suddenly you're asking them to make schedules and to execute a plan. It's very different. And from their mindset, there's a risk involved, right? Yeah. So this fancy schmancy AI system told me that my compressor is going to fail next week. What does it know, right? I've got 30 years experience in this. Yeah. So overcoming that barrier, that's the real challenge in the digital transformation strategy or life cycle.
That's true. Like people have to go from reactive to proactive, which is actually a good thing. But there is also a trust factor involved. That do people trust machines to tell them what to do? Like, right. People do not have the faith that the machine can tell them that, okay, this is going to happen. So they are like, if it happens, we will see. Like, they really want to test out the machine for a while. And even then, people would not want to trust it. So, yeah, people change is a big factor when it comes to digital transformation. That's really true. So, any other thoughts that you would like to leave our audience with?
Well, let's say you're afraid that AI is going to take over the world. I just want to say that it has. Yeah, I've given several examples today where you interact with AI on a daily basis. Okay. So you're a user of AI, whether you like it or not. It's here to stay, but it's not a danger to you. So I want to emphasize that. Many people are afraid of artificial intelligence. It's not a danger because it really focuses on very specific, very targeted applications that may or may not help you, right? Again, it's the movies you watch and the books you order online and things like that. It's fairly benign. So don't be afraid that it is somehow a threat or an enemy to you. On the other hand, it is growing. So it's going into more and more businesses, more and more processes that you will interact with on a day-to-day level. So gaining some understanding of what AI is and how it works will help you. It will, first of all, alleviate any fears that you might have of the present or the future, and it will also let you interact with it more consciously so that it will benefit you even more, particularly in things like the social media ranking algorithms. They're very interesting. Depending on your behavior on each individual social media platform, that platform determines what you see. So if you know at least a little bit about how those methods work, you will be able to interact with that platform a bit more consciously allowing that algorithm to target you according to what you want rather than what it wants. And that will help you get some of that control back. So those algorithms deliver value to you by automation, by taking away a lot of complications. So if you use them correctly, they will be a help, a servant to you, rather than a dominating overlord, which is sometimes the fear that people have. On the other side of things, if you are maybe at the start of your career, and you're looking towards, what field should I get educated in? What kind of jobs should I have? So even if you're not going to take a computer science or a math degree, and I respect that, I'm a mathematician myself, but there should be diversity out there. Again, no matter what job you're going to have in the future, you are going to interact with artificial intelligence. So again, having some basic knowledge of these technologies is going to help you, no matter what you do. So maybe take a few courses on it at university, or if you're past university, there are huge numbers of courses available for free on the internet. Just visit YouTube or Coursera or any of the other education platforms. And with the investment of $0 and a few hours of your life, you will gain understanding that will help you, again, on a daily basis to understand what's going on. And this field is developing very quickly, which means that new stuff will come out. It will affect you differently in the next few years than it does today. So staying abreast of these developments, I think, is helpful.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think your insights, the examples that you have shared are really, really valuable, and the audience is going to enjoy the interview just like I did.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned and we'll see you around for the next